Hello, welcome back. We are going to continue to read the novel Lord of the Mysteries, Volume 1, Clown by Cuttlefish That Loves Diving. Last time we read up to chapter 66, I think. We got some information about Vanessa, about Chris who caused the Alfalfa disaster. So, yeah, let's continue with chapter 67 Response. The moon, high in the sky, hung silently in the darkness. It illuminated Tingan City, the city of universities, as it gradually fell silent. Clan stood in front of his desk and looked through his oriel windows to see the empty daffodil street. He heard the sound of carriages quickly galloping far away without causing a din. He picked up his wine leaf patterned silver pocket watch and snapped it open. He took a glance at it and drew the curtains, making the yellowish lights of the gas lamp reflect back into the bedroom. Client turned around at an adequate speed, locked his room, and switched off the gas bulb. The room was immediately covered in darkness. Only a silver of red moonlight penetrated the curtains. It gave rise to an atmosphere perfect for many late night folk tales. Client took out the silver knife he had applied for. He imagined the spherical light and entered a half cogitation state. He focused his mind according to his previous practice, allowing his spirituality to spew out from the tip of his blade. Then he allowed the emotion to miraculously fuse with his surroundings, sealing off the room. He was doing it to prevent any abnormal stirrings that could wake Benson and Melissa. Following that, Clan put down the knife, walked 4 steps in a counterclockwise manner. Every step was accompanied by an incantation from Earth. The unchanging roars and murmurs intuited him. The same mania and pain inflicted on him, he did his best to control himself and withstood the most grueling and dangerous stage in his half conscious state. The greyish white fog was endless. The dark red stars were at varying distances from him. The towering divine palace stood erect like a dead giant. Nothing seems to have changed. The silence and antiquity that had accumulated over thousands of years swamped him. No, there is a change. Client silently muttered to himself. His gaze locked onto a dark red star near him. That was the star symbolizing justice. The star's deep redness began to pulse. It did so with average amplitude but did not stop. Client carefully spread out his spirituality towards the deep redness. The moment two made contact, he felt a hum in his head. He saw a blurry and distorted scene and heard the illusory but stacked voice of prayers. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. You're the mysterious ruler above the grey fog. You're the king of yellow and black who wields good luck. I pray for your help. I pray for your loving grace. I pray for you to give me a good dream. I pray for you to give me a good dream. I pray for you to give me a good dream. The female voice resounded constantly in an intermittent fashion. Client's psyche turned more irritable and chaotic. It was akin to listening to someone upstairs pounding on the floor when he had just fallen asleep. He repressed his emotions and used cogitation to calm the urge. He carefully discerned the blurry scene that appeared before him. It was a girl dressed in white robes. She had a head of beautiful golden hair. She was sitting before 4 flickering flames, her head lowered as she kept chanting. From the distorted image, Clan barely recognized her to be Miss Justice. At this point, he confirmed that the ritual incantation he had created would precisely point towards the great fog, towards him. This gave him a huge sense of achievement going, going from nothing to having something. I won't praise myself for being awesome. Glenn's mood turned for the better. He felt that the pleasing voice that echoed in his ears like a buzzing fly was not now acceptable. With a thought, he attempted to create a response in his mind, transferring it through the intricate connection to the dark red star. I'm aware. The gray layer emanated before him. A distorted and blurry figure stood in the deepest depths, the spot where his eyes ought to be swirled with deep redness as his voice resounded repeatedly in the vast and empty world. I'm aware, I'm aware, I'm aware. Audrey Hall was jolted awake suddenly. She sat up with her blanket wrapped around her as her mind was fully occupied with the scenes she saw in her dream. She knew very well she had dreamed of the fool, the mysterious being that lived above the fog. Is this a response to my morning prayers? Audrey, who quickly entered her spectator state, calmed down and analyzed. Although she did not understand why the fool did not respond on the spot and only did so at night, she was still shocked that the ritualistic magic was effective with a few lines of incantation. In the past, she had prayed to the Evanite goddess, but had never received any response. Even if Mr. Fool was not a god, he is likely not far from being one. Audrey slowly inhaled before exhaling slowly. Since he was a powerful existence that she had no means of resisting, she quickly threw aside her worries. She began considering what to do next. First, I have to completely digest the spectator portion. My acting is still pretty good. Second, I have to seek out the psychology alchemists. Third, I should try to obtain the telepathist potion formula from Mr. Fool or clues regarding the psychology alchemist elsewhere. However, every godlike existence should have a complete sequence pathway that belongs to them. They might not know the formula of other sequence pathways. A new beyonder organization like Psychology Alchemist might not be able to garner Mr. Fool's attention. With the connection severed, Client sat at the bronze table seat of honor in a rather good mood. He was completely covered in grey fog. He leaned back and clenched his fist over his to cover his mouth. He recalled and analyzed the process. At that moment, he was the only living being in the world of the grey fog. Apart from that, there was absolute silence. It seems I can only pass information over, and unable to use the pass in here. From the looks of it, my idea of manipulation would not work. Clan kept broadening his mouth as he silently made a conclusion. He had originally planned on attempting to bind his body with the world of the grey fog in the same manner if the incantation and ritual proved effective. As such, he could then leverage all the power of this mysterious space. If that happened, he could pray to himself, and through such a manipulative manner, he could go around the limitations, the mysteries, and the danger, allowing him to fully use the grey fog world. For example, he could first conduct a ritual and pray to himself for spells. Following that, he could come above the grey fog, answer his own request, and bestow it. From the looks of it, I was being too idealistic. My understanding and control of the grey fog world has not reached that level. Clan shook his head in a self-deprecating manner and planned on leaving. At that moment, he saw a dark red star that represented the hangman begin to pulse. He heard the ethereal and the formless voice spread out. I coincidentally chanced upon the hangman's ritual. Clan nodded in thought. He sat at the seat of honor of the long bronze table and extended his hand to tap on the star. His spirituality spread at it as it touched the pulsing deep redness. He heard the hangman's repeated prayers along with a blurry scene. The hangman was draped in pure black robes in the sea. He stood in front of four plumes of fire. Surrounding spirituality had formed a wall isolating him from any external influence. Clan did not immediately respond. All he did was watch and listen silently. You are the king of yellow and black who wields good luck. I pray for your help. After the hangman finished his prayer, he waited for a while. Seeing that there was no response, he began dismantling the spirituality wall, extinguished the candles, and tidied up the altar. Finally, he swiped his extended hand as aqueous light spread out, making the altar table look brand new. Water based well, the bestowment of the storm. The hangman is indeed a seafarer. Client nodded slightly. Before the scene vanished, he responded via the method he imagined, transmitting it to the blob of the dark redness. Alger Wilson was situated in the Rorschach archipelago city of generosity. He had not gone with the sailors to the famous Red Cabaret. Instead, he stayed inside the hotel and sealed the door and windows shut to attempt the ritual the fool had described. After after familiarly finishing the prayer, Alger waited patiently for a moment, but did not receive any response. It seems this attempt isn't too successful. Mr. Fool needs to change methods. He was both overjoyed but also a little disappointed. After everything was done, Alger planned on going downstairs for a bottle of Lanty-proof alcohol that could aid a folk of rage to unleash his powers. Mandated punishers of the Lord of Storms were rather fond of this sort of beverage. Pulling open the door, Alger was about to walk out when his vision blurred. He saw a grey fog below in the corridor and an hazy human figure sitting in the deepest depths of the fog, as if on a high throne. I'm aware. The familiar deep voice reverberated around Alger's ears, causing him to freeze where he stood as his head slightly throbbed in pain. Alger's eyes suddenly turned dark. He looked around but realized that nothing had changed. There was still the same squeaky floorboard, the same aged wall candlesticks, and the same unclean corridor. I am aware. The voice was still resounding by Alger's ears. His expression sank as he hit his chest lightly with his fist, but did not say any words of respect to the Lord of Storms. After a long silence, Alger's expression was restored to normal, but his gaze seemed deeper. Client did not spend too much time above the grey fog. When all the remnant voices returned to normal, he enveloped himself in his spirituality and plunged into the grey fog, plummeting to the material world. The lights before him flew rapidly, like the scenes of a movie played back at a speed of tens of times faster than normal. After Clan felt faint, he saw curtains that let crimson moonlight through along the blurry outlines of the desk and the bookshelf. He picked up the silver knife again and removed the spirituality wall in the room. Then a sudden gust of wind opened the door and went through the corridor. He was completely relieved when he saw there was no stirrings from Benson's or Melissa's room. This luck enhancement ritual is really indispensable for traveling. It's concealed and mystical. Clan suddenly murmured and closed the door again, walking towards his bed. His mission tomorrow was to head to the underground markets for beyonder items with Old Neil. Uh, Footnote about the ritual or it being indispensable for traveling. It's a Chinese meme that originated from Stephen Chow's movie Flirting Scholar. Okay, chapter 68 Monster. At dusk, the setting sun cast long shadows of the carriages and horses. Having informed Benson and Melissa that he was having dinner at the Blackthorn Security Company, Clan headed to the harbor with old Neil on a public carriage. He was dressed in cheap formal attire, afraid that the conflict might break out in such a complicated location. If he damaged his tuxedo, which he took painstaking care of, he would probably cry his heart out. When the sunlight appeared on the to turn fiery, carriage stopped. Old Neil, in his usual classic black robe and a black felt hat with a rounded edge, ignored the gazes of others and walked diagonally to the evil dragon bar ahead of them. Even though the bar was slightly far away and the heavy doors were tightly shut, clients still heard wave after wave of rapturous shouts. They appeared to be cheering on a hero. When he came close, he suddenly sensed something. He turned his head towards the warehouse opposite the bar. He, has to see, he saw a stocky man dressed in uniform standing at a hidden corner on the rooftop. The man carried a huge grayish white mechanical box and held a thick rifle in his hand. The grayish white mechanical box was obviously connected to the same colored rifle via piping. Steam pressured rifle? Klein muttered in shock. He looked at old Neil and said, "This bar can obtain such weapons? This was military controlled item. Although it used extracted, wow, extracted phlogiston, size and weight of the steam backpack was still shocking. Something only a true warrior of blood and iron could withstand. The rifle had an extremely high muzzle velocity and shocking destructive power too. Matched with a suitable scope, it was nearly equivalent to an inferior sniper rifle. What? Old Neil squinted his eyes as he looked over, having confused look too. Did something happen here? Something happened? Lion surveyed his surroundings and discovered a few more men holding repeating rifles who were searching for something. What happened? Old Neil approached the bar and asked the brawny man guarding its door outside. The brawny man obviously knew old Neil and smiled wryly. The bar was nearly destroyed earlier. Apparently, a wanted man was here trying to buy materials and was recognized. And this was what resulted from it. Oh Lord, what did he do, and how dangerous was he to receive such treatment? My legs went limp seeing all those firearms, limper than after spending an entire night with Ginger Sunny. He did not know the identity of the wanted man, and much less know about the people who came to buy materials had beyond us mixed in. Wanted man? Do you know his name? Old Neil asked in interest. I think it was Triss or something, Ronnie man answered uncertainly. Instigator Triss? Client nodded in enlightenment, having understood what was happening. Triss did not know that Joyce Meyer had cast his suspicion on him. Therefore, he has sauntered right into the market to purchase materials without heed. He was likely recognized by an informant of either the Mandate Machinery High Mind or the Nighthawk, resulting in an intense clash. Was he caught? Client tapped his silver inlaid black cane. Based on the surrounding situation, likely not. The brawny man shook his head slightly and gestured with his chin to the rooftop of the warehouse opposite him. He rushed out before those terrifying guys arrived. Bloody hell, I have never seen a man run faster than he did. You haven't seen the true skills of an assassin, or you might have been taken away to some indescribable place for further re education, Clan thought. Is the market still open? Old Neil changed subjects and asked. It just restored operations, replied the brawny man affirmatively. That's great. Old Neil quickened his pace and extended his right hand, pushing open the heavy door. Clan followed closely in tow and walked in. He nearly fainted at the stuffiness and the smell of alcohol that inundated him. In the middle of Evil Dragon Bar was a boxing ring. Two half naked men were in an intense brawl, and surrounding them were dozens of customers shouting and They supported, cheering on the side they supported with no lack of vulgarities. Old Neil ignored them and led Klein around the boxing ring and walked into the billiard room at the back. In the billiard room, there were two people holding cue sticks, having a casual conversation. When they saw Old Neil enter, they instantly fell silent for a few seconds. After confirming the visitor's identity, they moved aside and let Klein and Old Neil pass through the secret door behind them. After passing through a few rooms, the sight before Klein's eyes opened up. He saw a place that was about the size of a lecture hall from his previous life. Some vendors had set up roadside stalls with bottles and cans all over. Passers-by strolled through them, either scrutinizing their goods, chatting, or comparing prices. They have to give 5% of their profit to Swain. Ah, he's the boss of Evil Dragon Bar, former captain of the mandated Punishers squad, and older than I am. He's someone who wishes to drink himself to his death. Old Neil explained in a uh, gra- garrulous manner. Clan thought and gave an honest evaluation. A rather profitable business. After all, his only expense was providing the venue and protection. Any item that catches your fancy but you lack the money, you can borrow from Swain. But of course, he charges very high interest. Old Neil trailed off as he gnashed his teeth. As expected, it's like running a casino. They would provide ussuries. Klein held his walking stick and looked around as he asked curiously, Mr. Swain is a seafarer? The captain of a mandated Punisher squad was likely a Sequence 7. No, he is only a folk of rage. Tingen is not a coastal city, so the Church of Goddess is much more powerful than the Lord of Storms here. Old Neil scoffed. Actually, Swain had the chance of becoming a seafarer, was af- but was afraid that he would lose control, so he chose to give up. Just as Klein was about to ask if the boss of the bar had any experience of nearly losing control, he suddenly felt a strange phenomena happen to his left. It appeared to be something hiding there, muttering and recounting. Klein turned his head and saw a pale young man. He was wearing an old linen shirt, blue jeans that the working class normally wore. His eyes looked demoralized with a hint of craziness, and he was constantly mumbling. His perception is very high, or perhaps distorted. Klein creased his eyebrows and muttered. It was the young man's spiritual perception that triggered his own spiritual perception. Generally speaking, the spiritual perception sensing something causes some interaction. It was nearly impossible to conceal it from others, but others referred to spirit mediums who had cast their abilities, as well as powerful figures with similar special traits. A beyonder like Clan who would actually find it hard to detect, only detecting if one's spiritual perception reached a certain heightened level or an abnormal distortion happened. They made eye contact, and the young man with messy black hair walked towards him with an expression looking as though he was half sleepwalking and half insane. He stopped before Klein and stared at him. Suddenly, he guffawed. Haha, it's the smell of death. Death. Before he was done talking, he suddenly screamed tragically. His eyes shut tightly as the liquid of the color of blood flowed out. Ah, damn it. Young man covered his eyes and hugged his head. He struggled on the ground and only calmed down after a while. He then lay there panting. During the entire process, not a single customer or stall vendor looked over. Client pressed down his half top hat and looked at old Neil. Client's mouth was hanging open in shock, using his action to demonstrate his shock and request for advice. Don't mind him. He's Edemiasul, an orphan. nicknamed Monster. He was born with high spiritual perception and he has always been able to see things that he shouldn't, hear voices he shouldn't. Hence, he is always raving and often getting hurt. Old Neil shook his head as he explained. He could tell that my body was once dead. Bland knitted his eyebrows and lowered his voice as he asked in doubt, haven't the Nighthawks, mandated punishers, or the machinery hive mind ever thought of taking him in? No, we do not have a sequence potion that suits him, said old Neil with a sigh. Right. He was born with a starting point of half a sequence. Klein asked again curiously. What sequence pathway suits him? The sequence 9 that suits him is called Monster. His nickname came from there. It's a pity that only the life school of thought has control over the sequence pathway's beginnings. Old Neil replied softly. He tried to keep the conversation between him and Klein from the people around them who avoid leaking information to the mysticism enthusiasts. Life school of thought? Klein recalled the information he had previously read. The secret organization appeared in the beginning of the current epoch. Its actual origins were unknown, but it was mainly passed down via master and apprentice. Their theories and beliefs were hardly known. Klein only knew that they separated the world into three layers: the world of absolute rationality, also known as the absolute truth world, the world of spirit, and the material world. Rumor had it that the secret organization had once pro- produced a soothsayer. Wasn't that a sequence pathway that corresponded to seer? Confusing, really confusing. Klein shook his head and saw a demi-sol struggle to get up and then wander off to another corner. He reorganized his thoughts and followed behind old Neil. They walked past one stall after another. There were plants like moonflower, fingered citron, night vanilla, mineral resources like silver, topaz, ruby, and so on. It's really very well equipped, Klein muttered softly. Mysticism enthusiasts of all ages and genders around him would be stopping, distinguishing, and talking at times. It gave the area a bustling vibe. Walk around on your own. I'm going to settle my bill. Old Neil pointed at one of the two rooms at the end. All right, Plant nodded without a thought. He strolled with his black cane and came before a stall which sold self made amulets. He took a careful look at it for a while. Just when Klein prepared to speak with the seller, he suddenly heard someone asking the stall behind him, is this powder ground from cow teeth peonol? Cow teeth peonol? Isn't that one of the supplementary ingredients of the spectator potion? Klein thought and then turned around to look at the inquirer. Justice had repeated the formula for the potion several times, so Klein had been left with a remarkably clear impression of the ingredients. Um, Footnote for what was it? Oh, that difficult one word. Okay. A substance supposed by 8th century chemists to exist in all combustible bodies and to be released in combustion. Chapter 69 Protection Amulet. Klein looked over and saw the person inquiring about the cow teeth peonol. The man was less than a meter away from him. He was wearing a black suit and a half top hat of the same color. He had a cane adorned with silver in his hand and a pair of gold framed spectacles on his face. He had a refined bearing. Yes, do you need it? This can here cost 3 soldi. The owner of the stall was wearing a long black robe, one filled with mysticism traits. The inquirer, whose sideburns were pale yellow, thought for a moment before saying, can it be cheaper? I still need to buy the other ingredients too. For example, this bottle of white edged sunflower petals. The stall owner considered for a few seconds before grudgingly replying, 2 solely and sixpence. I don't think you can find a price cheaper than that. Klein immediately felt that he was overthinking things after seeing how the besticle man was buying ingredients other than the cow teeth payoneal. However, he still tapped his glabella twice as an act of caution. He swept the man with his spirit vision. No problems. He looked very healthy. His emotions were all right too. Mister, you need to keep this up. Client retracted his gaze, turned around, and looked at the stall selling homemade amulets once again. The amulets were placed neatly before him. Some of them were made of pure silver, some with steel, others forged from gold. Only a few of the amulets had a weak aura emanating from them, some crimson, some pale white, and some golden. This meant that some of them had weak traces of spirituality and were definitely effective to a certain extent. Client looked at the amulets carefully and confirmed that the stall owner were making the amulets had some foundation in mysticism. The stall owner did not make any mistake matching the different energy sources to the different incantation. He was also extremely accurate at choosing the materials that corresponded to the different energy sources. Of course, a mere mysticism enthusiast would definitely make some mistakes. Klein noticed that the stall owner did not fully understand the incantation. One could not create an incantation simply by translating the contents of a prayer into Hermes. The incantation had to follow a certain format that followed unique rules. The other problem was the stall owner had made many mistakes of varying degrees when he was choosing the suitable symbol for the energy sources. That explained why there was only 2 or 3 amulets releasing the faint light of the dozens that laid before him. As for how much of an effect the 2 or 3 amulets would have, Clan could only say that it was better than nothing. An amulet that was truly good, equipped with obvious effects, needed the craftsman to release his spirituality from a blade while carving the incantation and symbols. If one wanted even better results, they would have to supplement it with ritualistic magic. And these two things were not something that an ordinary person could achieve. He tapped his glabella twice, then pointed at the upper left corner of the stall with his black cane. How much for these two? He did not ask about the amulets that had a rudimentary colored aura but half completed items. Other than external shape, they had not been carved with incantation or symbols. To Klein, there was no reason to purchase the amulet that had weak effects. What he wanted to do was transform the half completed amulets into true amulets. Hmm, I'll make amulets that can protect a person from danger, one each for Benson and Melissa. As for my own, I can ask the Nighthawks to supply me with the ingredients. Man, I must have been influenced by old Neil. I don't feel any guilt when I'm doing something like that. Client's mind wandered as he watched the stall owner pick up the half completed silver amulets. The first silver amulet was elongated and had a cavity in the middle. Around it were patterns of angel like feathers. The craftsmanship was intricate and very beautiful. The other was simple, almost completely devoid of any additional decorations or carvings. It had a vertical line representing the night and a circle representing the crimson moon. Clan, who paid much attention to appearances, took a liking to them immediately. This is 6 solely, middle-aged tall owner said, pointing to the intricate amulet. He was a man of few words. After pausing for a while, he rubbed the simpler piece and said, "This is 5 solely 3 pence. That's too expensive. They're still far from being an amulet." Klein had slowly been influenced by Benson and Melissa, so he had begun cultivating the habit of haggling. After battle of After a battle of words, he brought the 2 silver accessories at 5 solely 6 pence and 4 solely 9 pence respectively. Yea, they can only be considered silver accessories for time being. Lion had that in mind. Hence, only 3 pence was deducted from the reimbursement he received for his divination club membership. And received 2 silver accessories and placed them into his pocket. He was about to head to another stall when he heard a gentle voice. Sir, why are you not buying a completed amulet? Completed amulet? Lion turned his head over and found a teenage girl asking him the question. She was about 15 years of age and wore a lacy yellow dress while holding onto a wheeled hat with a ribbon. It's because I intend to make my own amulets. As you know, that is the wish of every enthusiast of mysticism. Client minced his word and answered. He did not wish to make the stall owner think he was trying to snatch his business, even though he had considered using his skill to earn a quick buck. The teenage girl had naturally curly brown hair, and her face was adorable due to her baby fat. She looked at Clan with her light blue eyes and asked sincerely, Can I seek your advice on choosing an amulet? Well, I was introduced here by a friend. I've been here several times and I have deep interest in mysticism, but I still do not know much about it. She, my friend, is going to turn 16 soon. I wish to select an amulet as a gift to her. I didn't bring her along as I wanted to be a surprise. I had previously sought her advice, but I cannot remember lots of critical points. Clan gave a gentlemanly smile. What kind of protection amulets are you looking for? Something to avert misfortune? Something to avoid illness? Something that gives fortune? Different requirements would require different energy sources, which means there must be point to a different god. Different gods would have different corresponding constellation, and the different constellation would mean different materials have to be used. For example, the incantation of averting misfortune would belong to the Empress of Misfortune and Horror, who is the Evernight goddess. As mysticism enthusiasts, we all know that the symbol of Evernight goddess is the moon. The corresponding metal would thus be pure silver. Therefore, if we hope to avert misfortune, it is best that we choose an amulet that is made of pure silver and has 3 corresponding incantations. We would also have to make sure that the incantations are of correct language and format. The corresponding symbol of the Empress of Misfortune and Horror means the path number, the spell's characteristic, and the relative position of symbols, etc., must also be correct. But this is too complicated, and there is no need for me to explain this for you, Lion added inwardly. The girl's eyes sparkled. She asked with little doubt, Can a follower of goddess wear an amulet belonging to other god? No problem. The gods do not mind such small matters. Client consoled her. It was not a problem for the person wearing the amulet, but the person creating the amulet had to be careful. If a believer of Lord of Storms were to craft an amulet of the eternal blazing sun, they would most likely receive something malicious. Of course, these refer to amulets requiring the aid of ritualistic magic. The craftsman need not pay much attention to this otherwise. The teenage girl heaved a sigh of relief. I hope to get her an amulet of good health. Which date should I choose from? The eternal blazing sun, Earth Mother, or the God of knowledge or wisdom? God of knowledge and wisdom. There should be no problem with the eternal blazing sun and the Earth Mother. The former is represented by the sun, while the latter is represented by the brown planet. Clan smiled as he said, The material of the sun is gold, while the metal that symbolizes the brown planet is lead. I would suggest the sun, but I do not know if you bought enough money along with you. The reason for his suggestion was because he had noticed among the 3 amulets with rudimentary spiritual glow, one of them was a health amulet that came under the domain of the sun. Isn't this? Before the teenage girl finished her sentence, she stopped and warily looked at the stall owner who was waiting silently. She thought for a moment before asking, After I decide on the material, how should I distinguish the incantation and corresponding symbols? Do you know Hermes? Lion asked instead. I just started learning it, the teenage girl replied, a little embarrassed. Then let me choose it for you. Lion pointed at the health amulet made of gold and said, this one has no problem. Be it, in, be it in the incantation or the representing symbol. The teenage girl lifted the edges of her dress and squatted in the front of the amulet. She picked up the health amulet with the designs of sun's rays around its edges. She felt as though the amulet was nourishing her, making her feel completely relaxed. Thank you. Thank you. She stood up and curtis- curtsied in gratitude. Lion laughed and said, leave the rest to you and the stall owner. I have other things to tend to. He looked at the stall owner as he spoke and noticed that the man had a weird look in his eyes, as if deciding if he had to give the cut of profit to Klein. With a smile, Klein did not bother with the matter anymore. He continued touring the underground market, but he didn't notice any true beyonder ingredients. At this point, old Neil had already paid off his debts. He was holding a dark colored wooden box in his hands. He pointed to the other room behind and said, after he noticed Klein's look of doubt, go there if you wish to buy or sell beyonder ingredients. After all, no one wishes to let others know what extraordinary items they are purchasing. I understand, Klein nodded as though in thought. There's no need for him to go there for the time being. He headed toward the exit of the underground market together with old Neil. How much for these elf flowers? A sudden query entered Klein's ears. Elf flowers? That's also an ingredient for spectator potion, Klein thought as he glanced sideways. He once again saw the refined, bespectacled man. What's the matter? Old Neil asked curiously. Nothing much. Klein retracted his gaze. Although he was a quasi member of Nighthawks, he did not feel that all beyonders had to be absorbed by the churches or locked up. He believed that it had to depend on the situation. Spectators definitely posed a little danger to society or the kingdom, and chances of losing control as a sequence 9 were very slim. After leaving the evil dragon bar, Klein and O'Neill took a public carriage and left the harbor. They then split ways at the North Borough and headed to their respective homes. The public transport steered towards into Daffodil Street and stopped by the side of the road. Klein was about to get off the carriage when he suddenly saw a young lady wearing grayish white dress about to board the carriage. The lady had smooth black hair, her face a little round. She had thin eyes and unassuming features, but paired together she gave off a feeling that she was sweet and gentle. Klein noticed her not because of her beauty, but because he discovered that her body was shuddering slightly. It was an unnatural shudder. Miss, are you all right? Klein asked in concern. The young lady shook her head abruptly. No, I'm just too tired. The people behind Klein were urging him to get off, so Klein could only leave the carriage. When he found his footing, he paid attention to the situation from before again. Pinched his glabella twice, planning to determine if the lady was indeed all right. He had intention of sending her to the hospital if she had serious illness that was going to act up soon. Activating his spirit vision, the colors of his aura started to surface. Clyde turned around and prepared to look at the sweet and gentle young lady. Oh, that is a cliffhanger. We have to stop here today. Thank you for listening. Nice day. See you next time. Bye bye.